All right, let's just do
Let's go.
it.
Let's go.
How are you?
I am so good. How are you?
I'm doing super well. I really like the color shirt you're wearing.
Listen, I thought we were gonna be hoodie twins.
Oh,
I
hold on one
thought-
second. Well, technically, we are hoodie twins,
Yes, we are.
but we just aren't identical right now, which is totally
Yeah,
fine. But I love that
yeah.
sage color. That's like one of my favorite colors.
Oh, me too. Me too. I'm
So,
slowly painting my whole house this color.
are
So,
you?
yes,
Get
we got
those
the
paint buckets
downstairs. We
ready.
got the downstairs up the stairwell. Second story is next. So,
Oh, okay. I respect that. The what I'd love from you because I I actually I interviewed Andrew Coates yesterday and it was so
yeah.
funny because him and I just started shooting the shit and like going right into like tangible stuff in like 30 minutes and I was like, "Hey, why don't you introduce yourself to like everyone in the podcast?" So why don't I nail that down first? Why don't you introduce yourself so that people know who you are and then you and I are just gonna start shooting the shit and probably get super deep on some things.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren. You can find me on Instagram at Lauren with two N's dot Elizabeth X. I am a nutrition and health coach and here to spread the good word of positivity, health, and well-being.
I love that. So my first question for you is how the heck did you become a nutrition coach?
How did I become the coach? So,
Hmm.
started off, of course, with my own health and fitness journey
Hmm.
and navigating that, picking up tools along the way that led to a passion for working with others. So, got certified in personal training, started training people one-on-one, small group classes. Of course, like many of us learned that a lot of their journey has to do with what they do outside of the gym.
Hmm.
So that led me to learning more about nutrition, mindset, and just through the years of connecting with people was pointed in the direction of NCI. So I went through NCI level one, level two, mindset, and took some of their other courses with gut health, hormones, all of that. But um, I just have really come full circle to realize that yes, we should be moving our body, but what we're consuming on a daily basis is a very integral part. So wanted to learn the
Mm,
science and the toolkit there to help people to the best of my ability.
I love that. And I feel like when I hear you say consuming too, like now that because little do the people know, you and I have sent very long, lengthy audio message via
Oh
Instagram. We're
yes.
like just getting
Immediately.
immediately getting very deep.
Immediately we got deep.
Yeah. So when I hear you say consuming, I also feel like I hear you say like what people are consuming on like a mental such spiritual thing as well.
Yes.
So based on so you went from being like a very specific nutrition coach and getting all these educational resources and things under your belt, what was sort of that, I guess, click moment for you where you're like, I need to also talk about this?
Also my own journey, of course.
There we go.
So in 2021, um, I was very deep in my own healing journey. And I was exiting a very abusive relationship, but being pulled towards more of the Eastern practices of yoga and meditation. And on January 1st, I had announced to the world, I'm going to go to yoga and meditation school. January 2nd, this account that I had connected and resonated with shared the school that she went to. So I immediately enrolled and throughout the yoga and meditation course, I realized that consumption truly is more than just food. It
Mm,
is what TV we're watching, what music we're listening to, the conversations that we're having. And when I started implementing that in my own life and feeling the benefits from it and the growth,
mm,
I just found that it was very important to get that out to others and let them know that, in Ayurveda, it is very much about consumption of all senses.
mm,
So I work that into the work that I do with others.
I love that. And I do think that is something that it's funny. I don't think it's talked about enough in like our your and mine like immediate circle. I think most of what we hear is the physiological side of
Yes.
fitness and health and all these things, which you and I know, yeah, of course they're super important. Uh, but also we know that when there is that missing link for your mental health and that sort of other foundation when it comes to that we don't often talk about, I think that is such a missing piece. So I love that you sort of found that through your own journey of saying like, hey, something else is missing
Yeah.
besides this, nutrition aspect of life. What are some things that you've noted in your own life that you feel like you used to consume a lot and now you consume less of, or maybe don't anymore? Ooh, the giggles are out there.
Oh, yes. A lot. I am not somebody that I'm not going to sit here and act as if I don't ever eat processed food. That's not
Mm,
real. I'm a human. I'm flawed. Processed food is yummy.
hmm
But one, conversations and environments. I've left workplaces that were not conducive to my growth or
mm,
hindered me in a way of putting stress on my body that I did not want to carry.
mm,
Um, music is a big one. I love music. If anybody
mm,
follows me on Instagram, you're going to come across me dancing and singing in the car. It's just what I
hmm
do.
hmm
Always connect with music. But and while I like all genres, I grew up around a lot of music that was very derogatory towards women because the
mm,
beats were cool and we're just
right.
not even really aware of the words that are implanting into our psyche.
Mm,
Um, and then throughout my healing journey, there was a phase where I was very much into the angry feminist rage music.
mm,
And now on the other side of that, I see how that was affecting my experiences. I was
yeah.
taking this in and therefore I was putting it out into the world. I was projecting all of that pain onto myself as well as others. So
Mm.
I would say that music was probably the number one, and then conversations and environments as well.
What's funny is I I definitely relate on the music level too because I love sad boy music. So like I'm like always listening to like something emotional and all these other things. But it's interesting because I've noticed, or I guess I've become more aware of as well recently that when I like start my day with some sad boy music, I'm like, huh, it's kind of putting me in the dumps a little bit. Like, no, like maybe we
Yeah.
start our feels like on a higher level or higher frequency today. But that's definitely something I've noticed. But also, I think conversations are really important too, from like a day-to-day standpoint. I guess what are some conversations, or I guess what are some boundaries that you've put up in your life that you're like, I either need to remove myself from this person, or what are some, I guess, some alerts or things that go off in your head when you realize a conversation is not something that particular conversation is you don't want to consume.
That's a good question. So I I'm in Jacksonville, Florida,
Mm,
and went to high school here, or actually went to elementary, middle, high school, went to college here, spent 4.5 years out in Houston, moved back when I was in, I think it was 2016 when I moved back. But pretty much have grown up around the same circle of friends.
mm,
And I say friends loosely. I have my inner circle and then I had acquaintances that I
mm,
knew. But throughout the years, though we're not as close, I still go to birthday parties or dinners, celebrations, and things. And I just noticed, again, I think with raising my own awareness, I started to notice just the conversations and how I felt, how my body felt leaving those
mm,
dinners where it was just it was just gossip and talking so
mm,
negatively about people or talking about all the negative things in the world or talking about the things that they're watching on
mm,
television. That's just very drama and sensationalized. But I just started paying attention to how my body was reacting to those things. And I think through finding my voice and my truth and starting to
mm,
advocate for myself, I don't go to those things anymore. Like I
yeah.
do not. That is, some people might consider that selfish. I actually think it's very selfless because when you
Mm,
clear all of that out, you become the person that you're truly meant to be. And that inspires and impacts people more than we could even comprehend.
mm,
So I think it was through my awareness and then just learning how to advocate for myself and being okay with removing myself from people that I have outgrown.
Mm. I think that's so important. And I like how you reframe selfish to selfless because I think that is something we all feel. We almost feel like we put this guilt on ourselves. We put this, it's almost like we shame ourselves in some ways when, we say no to something or we tell somebody no. But I think that is so important. It's not that you're being selfish. It's almost like, at least from what I pulled from therapy, is the best way to reframe it is you're actually prioritizing that relationship by becoming more selfless and saying no to these things, right? Because in a way, if you keep showing up for things that you don't want to, or having these conversations that drain you, or, you know, keep putting yourself in these positions over and over again, it's just going to drain your own energy, right?
Yes.
And it's going to maybe have you say something you really don't want to say to that person, right? Or
Mhm.
just really, damage the relationship in the long term. So I think that is such a good reframe in what you said, where it's like, setting that boundary with
Mhm.
that person, with this group or anything like that is actually putting you in a much better place to feel good and to help others.
Yes. And like, obviously, there's some nuance there. So,
Mm-hmm.
I, like many of us in our generation, have parent wounds. And both my parents, I'm very blessed that they're still alive and they're still in my life. But there was a period of time where it was very rocky with my mom and being very transparent. It's still rocky with
Mm-hmm.
my dad. Um, but having to teach them and introduce them to the new version of Lauren that seems
Mm-hmm.
to kind of be created on a biannual basis. I keep having these rebirths. And so I'm like, just get used to meeting a new me.
Mm-hmm.
um, but there was a period of time where I obviously wanted to keep my mom around. I love her. I want her to have a relationship with my son, but I would have to be very firm in those boundaries. And I can remember there was a dinner that we had gone out to, and there was a little bit of alcohol involved. And um, she was crossing a boundary for me. And I said, if you cross this one more time, I'm going to get up and remove myself.
Mm-hmm.
And she did. And I did.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of days went by and she reached out and apologized. And she didn't remember most of the conversation, but I said, can we please meet? Sat down with her face to face and explained these
Mm-hmm.
things. And I just said, this is not a phase for me. This is not a motto of having boundaries. I love you and I want you in my life, but these conversations can't take place. Please stop projecting the past versions of me back
Mm-hmm.
onto me because I've already made peace with that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was very groundbreaking in our relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
now it's been about a year since that incident, but she now comes to me and asks me questions about how to heal and is
Mm-hmm.
opening her world up to that. And I think that it's so beautiful because for the longest time, I think at some point I was very steadfast and trying to push it onto her. And then once I
Mm-hmm.
started to step into more so embodiment and allowing her to witness me in my existence, that's when it started to actually resonate with her and open her up to the possibility. And again, I know that that is not going to be the case with everybody, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
very blessed in that sense that we've been able to navigate that. And by me being firm in those boundaries, but doing it from a loving place and still holding space for her, she's now come
Mm-hmm.
to this realization that she has her own inner work to do. And
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's so beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, one, I just want to say off the bat, like, I'm super proud of you for how you handled that. I mean, I was like, I don't know if it's as I get older, like I just get more emotional or just more empathetic, but I was getting emotional just from you saying that because I think that is such a beautiful example of one reinforcing a boundary,
Mhm.
right? So I think a great way that you did this was not only did you say, hey, I do not want to speak about this, but you also laid out the result of what will happen if this
Mhm.
continues, right? So you painted the picture like, hey, this is my boundary again, reinforcing this. and also if this persists, this is going to be the result, which I think is
Yeah.
super important and and speaks a lot to your emotional intelligence. And also, like you mentioned, like having that that hard having that hard conversation with her afterwards, and being able to, give her that space that she needs to also kind of realize what was going on. And like you said, hold that space for her as well. I think that again shows a lot for your own emotional growth, your own emotional maturity, to not only just set boundaries, but also to, have empathy for that person, also realize that, you know, they're not on the same path you are right now. Right? I
Right.
think that's something I've really learned. I would say, like you said, like biannual, like change and evolution of yourself. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm like on a bi-weekly thing right now,
Yeah.
where it's like, one of the realizations I had, just I read this book by Jay Shetty. It's called Eight Rules of Love, but it was basically just saying how, you know, we can't expect other people to be on the same growth pattern as us,
Yeah.
and to be able to get there in the same timeline as us,
Hmm.
right? I think because that's something I think when you start this journey of emotional growth and maturity, and having more hard conversations, get really fucking good at having those conversations and communicating all that, we also tend to think that we need to attract more people like that, or
Hmm.
everybody should be on this wavelength, right? But I think it's also in some ways it's kind of unfair to assume that just because we've done the work that other people are going to as well and will be doing that like on the same timeline. So I
Right.
think that is such an important thing that you did, was by, it's not like you kick this person out of your life. You just set boundaries. You communicated what this is, who you are now, what you want in that relationship. And like you mentioned, like because of your action and your example, it's allowed your mom to sort of have her own reflection and
Hmm.
create her own awareness around it, which I think is beautiful.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. It's we could talk about spiritual healing and all of that all day long, but
Yeah.
I agree with what you say. And I think this is a for those of us who do walk this path, the very narrow path,
Yeah.
um, and choose to do this work, I think it's a very natural step in the evolution that
Mm.
once our however you want to say it,
Hmm.
is open, we're like, we want everybody to see. And so we feel like we need to push it on to people. But
Mm.
I talk about cocoons pretty often, and I feel like while we may all collectively have this cocoon together, we all have these individual cocoons based on our life
Mm.
experiences and stuff. And trying to break somebody out of their own cocoon before they're ready is actually could be detrimental to their growth and obviously
Mm.
to the relationship as well. So yeah, I think this journey of growth is it's hard. It's hard,
Mm.
but it's a blessing that you really can't put into words.
Yeah. And I think I love I love that analogy of like a cocoon, right? Because I think that is so, it reminds me of one how I sleep, because I create a cocoon when I sleep. Like I just like I form this little cocoon that like so I
Yeah,
could just be in my own space.
yeah,
But two, I love that analogy of like it's almost like your evolution cocoon, right? Where it's just like you, like you said, like you're a butterfly evolves and becomes a butterfly when it's ready, right?
yep,
And I think that is the truth with everyone else, is like we can't force somebody to create change, because we know psychology 101, as soon as you try to force somebody to create a habit, they're going to be incredibly resistant to it,
right.
right? So I think in relation to, a lot of people who listen to this podcast who either are looking to change their relationships, change themselves, or change their nutrition, change their new fitness, it's one of those things where you have to meet yourself where you're at right now,
Hmm.
not where you think you should be.
Right. And also not where you used to be either. I think
Mm,
that's like a big one too in the work that we do, right?
mm,
Where we may start working with a mom who is trying to fit herself into a box in the way that she lived life way
mm,
before she had children and all of these other responsibilities. And that attachment to that previous identity is actually causing more resistance and
mm,
suffering, as opposed to just letting that go
mm,
and looking forward at the possibility of creating something that could even be potentially more vibrant, more exciting, more expansive,
Mm,
more healthy. But if we're keeping our eyes on what we used to do in the past, it just creates a whole bunch of resistance to the
mm.
process. So,
That's so true. And I think, and that's funny because I DM'd you, I think a few days ago. I was like, what do you want to talk about? And one of the things you talked about were limiting beliefs, right? And I
mhm.
think that's kind of speaks to what you're talking about right now is the limited belief where you don't either see yourself getting to that end goal or you,
Mhm.
like you just said, like you still see yourself as that same person who goes off track or overeats or stress eats or emotionally eats. What would you say, I guess, because you could either through the work you do or through your work with your clients, like what do you think some actionable first steps are for somebody who has limiting beliefs in order to start rearranging those thoughts?
Something that I have practiced myself as well as implemented with some clients is really digging in deep to their why. So
Mm,
oftentimes when we start working with somebody, they have this goal. And usually, when the words first come out of their mouth, it's a very surface level goal, like, I want to lose 20 pounds, or
mm,
I want to fit into this size dress. But when you start to ask why and you start to peel back those layers, then you start to find the intrinsic motivators. But then below the intrinsic motivators is usually where those limiting beliefs are lying, where they
mm,
think if they lose this weight or if they fit into this dress, then they'll be more confident, right?
mm,
And then we ask, well, why do you think that that would bring you confidence? Because you and I both know that it's not the achieving the goal, that specific goal,
mm,
that's going to do it. We have to kind of become that person now.
mm,
Um, so I think just continuing to ask why then allows us to get down to the root.
mm,
And oftentimes that's where all those limiting beliefs, like I said, are lying. And then we can start to then use um, either we could use science and we could use neuroscience to
mm,
start to shift those beliefs and show what's possible if we can let go. Um,
mm.
Sometimes I think I'm considered a little woo-woo, and I'm currently in the
Yeah.
process of learning how to translate and use more grounding language because I have found
Mm.
that we're all trying to say the same thing, right? We're all trying to say the same thing. Um, but I think that humans are much more capable than we can even really comprehend. Like, we're not even
Mm,
utilizing all of our brain. And we
mm,
could go into why, I don't know,
mm,
societal programming and all of these things as soon as we come out of the womb. But I
mm,
think we're more capable than we know that we are. And it's just giving ourselves the safety and the surrender to let
mm,
go of all of that and
mm,
open ourselves up to what if, instead of like looking
mm.
at all of the negative. It's like, what if I tried this? What's the worst that's going to happen? If you're safe and you're stable, try. And if you fail, it's not
Yeah.
really a fail, it's a lesson.
Mm,
So I
yeah.
love behavior change, mindset work, and then just tapping into the body, because I think at the end of the day, our body knows. It's just establishing that
Oh yeah.
connection with it.
Oh, 1000%. And it's so funny because and I wrote down a bunch of shiznit you just said because I think it's you touched on a lot of beautiful things, but just to touch on what you immediately said, I mean, you and I had that conversation of the amount of stress that I was feeling and
Mhm.
the actual physical symptoms that affected my body. And it's fucking crazy, right?
Yeah.
Because we really don't. And it's funny because I've had these reminders in my life, whether it's through panic attacks or anxiety, but to get like gut health things start happening. For me, that was such another wake up call, an eye opening thing where it's like, hey, this is incredibly important, not only to rein in physical health, but rein in your mental health. But some things
Yeah.
you talked about, which I really love. You mentioned self-confidence, but um something that and you dived into self-worth, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. Because the way I sort of paint self-confidence versus self-worth because a lot of people think they're the same thing, but they're really
Mhm.
not. Like self-confidence is really just like the paintings on the wall, right? Like in your house, like it's your decorations, it's like the pretty things you put up, right? But your self-worth is that foundation, right? Your foundation of what's holding your house up. And I think that is so important, right? Because when we ask these why questions, right, to our clients and to ourselves, we really are getting to the foundation of our self-worth and where we actually can see our perception of what we think is achievable,
Yeah.
right? We start to see, oh, that's where my ceiling is, or that's where I've put my ceiling, and that fucking sucks because I want this, but I don't think I can get this, right? So I think that is such an amazing thing to touch on because you really don't know, what you are capable of until you dig to that next level to say, well, why don't I think I can achieve this, right?
Yeah. Oh, I have a full body response to you right now because you're absolutely right. And I love that you use the analogy of the house with self-confidence and self-worth, because it's absolutely true. And I, it's not even, I don't, it's not that I think or I believe, I know that we are all inherently worthy just because we're
Mm,
here. It's like
mm-hmm,
one in, what is it, 1 in 400 trillion or billion chance of us getting here. And here we
mm,
are all
mm,
together.
mm-hmm,
um, so I think that we're all inherently worthy. And then we go through life experiences, whether it was like back from childhood or
mm,
anything like that, that starts to become noise.
mm,
And then the self-confidence too obviously comes into play. But I think to your point, the self-confidence, that decoration
mm,
can only truly come from the solid foundation. And
mm,
confidence, in by definition, is being reliable. So it's following through and doing the things that you say you're going to do.
mm,
And I think they almost play off of one another, because
mm,
if you're on that journey and you're starting to do the things that you say you will do, then you start to build that confidence. But that confidence
mm.
is ultimately going to lead you home to realize that you were always worth doing that from the start.
Yeah.
Oh, I
I
love
love that.
it.
Yeah, and it's so true. They really do play off each other, right? Because kind of like you said, if you, going back to like the decorations analogy, like you can dress up an ugly house with some decorations and things like
Yeah,
that, and it might like make it look pretty on the surface, right?
yeah,
But it's when you go to the roots of things, then you really realize, oh, this limiting belief is what's causing me to repeat the same pattern and behavior or continue to seek validation externally instead of internally from myself, right? I
yeah.
think and I think and I touched on this one day, but I think that's a big reason why a lot of people seek weight loss, because they believe it's going to increase their self-worth,
Hmm.
right? What are your thoughts on that and people's like thought process that this will give me that worthiness that I'm feeling or searching for?
It's a hard truth, but just from my observations, in my work, I've worked with a lot of different people.
Mm,
Mainly, I work with women now, but I have worked with men as well. And I've worked with people from all ages of life, all stages of life, as well as just observing my connections and experiences out in the real world.
mm,
I have known people with what many would consider to be the standard of athleticism or a body. I know people who are multimillionaires, and I've still seen how broken and unfulfilled they are.
mm,
Um, and again, I think it comes back to the fact that we're all inherently worthy, no matter what we look like, no matter what material items we have attained throughout our life. But that worth, nothing and no one can give it to us. There's
mm,
nothing that we can do
mm,
that's going to give us the worth. We have to find it within ourselves. And again, that is a process. To me, I always think that like our worth is almost an excavation process where we're just
mm,
like going in and starting to peel back all these layers and realizing like
mm,
what is not truly us. And I think if we keep doing that, then we will find again that worth that's been there all along.
mm,
Um, but I think the for the person who thinks they're going to find their worth in their weight loss goal.
Mm,
Again, I think the real question is, why do you believe that? And
mm,
in their observations, like I've asked somebody, do you know somebody that has this goal body that you're after? And they said, yeah,
mm,
I do. And I said, are they happy? And they thought about it and they're like, oh no, not really. Like they're actually, you know, dealing with some depression and alone and all of this stuff. I said, okay,
mm,
so do you think that by you just chasing this, that you're all of a
mm,
sudden going to find happiness and self-worth?
mm,
And you know, those conversations are hard, but they're also needed.
mm,
And yeah, again, it's just worth is not something that can be created or destroyed. We just have to go
mm.
in and excavate it and then claim it.
Yeah. I see you Newton's third law there.
Yeah, there you go. I know. Science. See, I'm not all woo-woo.
I love that. And I think it is so true because those light bulb conversations I think are so important. I think we all need those conversations like throughout our lives because those are the hard talks, those are the, hard realizations that, whether what you've been trying to search for, what you've been constantly chasing
Mhm.
may not be as shiny or as sparkly as you originally perceived it to be. And and I love how you sort of relate it back to that worth because once you realize this thing that you've been chasing isn't as shiny or as sparkly, then you're able to reflect it on yourself again. Well, you could say, well, like, I'm shiny and sparkly, and
Yeah.
no matter what I achieve, like, I can always go back to myself and say, like, hey, like, I am worthy of whatever I set, whatever goal I'm after. And, no matter, I have a rooted certainty in who I am, no matter what my goal is, who I encounter. So that way you're not sort of lending yourself out to
Yeah.
these either materialistic things or these conversations or people that sort of drain you. And I think that is such an important thing. And I think that kind of ties me to one of the other things you feel so passionate about right now is you mentioned, crystal clear goals as being something you are very, very interested in. So what does a crystal clear goal mean to you? And how does someone go about defining their crystal clear goal?
I think there's a series of questions, but also setting somebody up in the proper environment for it.
Mm,
You know, I'm sure I'm not alone in this, but what we find is that oftentimes someone is chasing success that is defined by someone else outside of them.
mhm,
And they actually don't know what they truly want at their core. Again, it could be
mhm,
that they think they're going to get this thing or they're going to feel this way if they get this. Um, and so I think the series of questions would be, and this is also kind of ties back to what we were just speaking on, but
mhm,
this question came to me at some point and I really sat with it for a while and I've shared it on Instagram before, but it is if you were to lose everything, if you were to lose your body, if you were to lose your home, your car, your clothes, like all of these things, your job, your money, if you were to lose everything, would you still love yourself?
mhm,
I think a lot of people would say no.
mhm,
And then the second question is, would you know how to build your life back up? And I
mhm,
also think a lot of people would say no, right?
mhm,
So, one, again, it's just getting into the fact that we have a society that has been programmed to look for everything outside of ourselves, but also to not actually connect with the inner you and define what success really truly looks and feels like for you. Because, someone may say, yeah, I want abs. This sounds so surface level, but I'm just throwing this out as an example. I want to
mhm,
have abs. And of course, you're asking them, like, why do you want that? But also, it's like, well, what are you willing to do and what are you willing not to do
Mm,
for that. And oftentimes they're going to come across, oh, I actually don't want to live that way just to achieve some abs.
mm,
Um, but I think if we can just, as a coach, for me, my job is to ask the questions and then to continue to ask
mm,
why, and then
yeah,
ask more questions off of that, just to be able to peel back all of the layers and actually figure out, is this a goal that this person truly does want?
right.
And how much are they willing to sacrifice? What are they willing to do? What are they not willing to do? Versus it just being something that looks nice on the surface because their
Mm,
friend did it, now they want to do it, or their parents push this pressure onto them, or their culture.
mm,
So again, I think it comes down to asking a lot of questions and it's very individualized, but getting all of the shit cleared out of the way so that they
mm,
can find that answer for themselves within themselves.
I love that. And I love that the question you asked is what are you willing to do and what are you not willing to do? Because I think that I think what you're not willing to do, I think that gives you a much clearer idea,
Hmm.
right? Of because if you have that answer in your head of like, oh, like, well, I'm not willing to reduce my calories a ton, or I'm not willing to give up my pizza nights or my bar nights or things like that, then it helps not only that person but the coach give you a much clearer direction on, well, this is what you have to do in order to get to this goal that you mentioned. But hey, since you're not willing to do this, we need to reframe your expectations around this goal, right?
Yes.
Maybe it's the speed in which that you thought you'd get there. Maybe it is the processes that you think that you'd undertake that maybe we need to tweak a little bit too. But I think defining again, I think this the whole goal is, which is kind of cool with coaching, is to help a client really create more self-awareness, right?
Yes.
Because the more self-awareness that you have, the more you know, like you said, what you want to do, what you don't want to do, and then it helps give you a much clearer path to what you actually want.
Yes. Yeah. It makes saying yes and saying no a much easier
Yeah.
process. Things become very clear, which
Mm.
then frees us from decision fatigue and then like the
Mhm.
FOMO that comes with all of that. Once you get very clear and you can see it in your head and know why, you're just clearing the runway for yourself. And
Mm.
I think to your point, the most important question is what are you not willing to do? And I love that you said, then we as a coach can reframe because that's how I see it as well. It's
Mhm.
not saying that this is not, we're not saying that you're not able to progress. We're saying you
Mhm.
may progress differently, or we may need to, you know, tweak this other thing that we're working on right now.
Mhm.
And also obviously manage those expectations. But it's not a yes or a no from us. It's just a how. And then we
Mhm.
reframe and we just kind of
Mhm.
shuffle the deck a little bit. I love that
Right.
you said that.
Yeah, well, I think and I think because there's never really a clear like yes or no in life, right? There's never like certain things, right? Like
Right.
a definitive thing. So I think it is important, right, to not just say like you can do this, you can't do this,
Yeah.
and really, because that's kind of like emotional validation, right? Where it's like by listening and asking you these questions, and same thing, you can apply this in any fucking thing in life, but by listening and asking these questions rather than just like giving that straight answer to you can't do this or that's not possible, right?
Yeah.
You now can get to that person's why much sooner, and
Hmm.
you actually allow them to come to that realization or thought process on their own, which is 10 times
Yeah.
more possible that they're going to achieve their goal when they perceive that, hey, this is my thoughts and this is my thought process, rather than same
Yeah.
thing. Like if you told your son, like, you can't fucking do this, then guess what? He's going to probably do it. Or same thing is like when you hear that thought process out and it becomes their own thing, then they're much more encouraged and motivated to do that thing because they got to that answer on their own with some
Hmm.
guidance. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. Autonomy and self-awareness. We want
Hmm.
everybody to have it.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to, so I got you for about 10 more minutes. I want to squeeze the juice out of this because I love these conversations. But when it comes to because you also mentioned like mistakes were kind of like a prevalent topic in your life right now too. And I imagine like again, when I imagine you say that to me too, I imagine you once looked at mistakes a certain way, where now you look at mistakes maybe a whole other way.
Mm-hmm.
So what did mistakes at one point mean to you? What did they mean to you now?
Bringing it back to my childhood and the inner child. My dad, of course, was raised a certain way, and therefore
Mm,
he raised me a certain way. But if I did not perform excellently in school, like if I brought home a B, it was
mm,
it was the problem. Same thing for when he put me in sports. It was I needed to perform, and that taught me, little me, that unless I was perfect, I wasn't worthy. I
mm,
wasn't, I wasn't, basically it was an all or nothing, right?
mm-hmm,
So I grew up many years being very afraid to try or to put myself out there because I was afraid of if it wasn't perfect
mm,
by in other people's eyes,
mm-hmm,
then I was a complete failure
right.
and would be afraid. And as I've developed through life and healed a lot of that, I now think of it as like, yeah, I want to fail. Like it's not
Mm,
that I'm not, it's that I'm learning. I think everything in this life is a lesson or a blessing. And so if I try something and it doesn't work out, it's not that I'm a failure. Like I need to give myself a fucking pat on the back for having the courage to
mm,
do it in the first place. But then
mm,
also, now I can observe what worked
mm,
well, what didn't, and I can get back up and try again. I think we're so like, I feel like humans, we get so scared of things. We get scared to try, we get scared to love. And it's like, none of those things, like trying's not going to end your life. Loving and
mm,
getting heartbroken is not going to end your life. It
mm,
sometimes feels like it.
right,
But ultimately, if we can see, like, no, like I've got me, I'm
right.
safe. No matter what happens, no matter how many times I stumble, if I just look back and see what made me stumble, then when I get back up, I now have more wisdom that I can apply to future situations and
Mm,
it just propels me forward. It's funny because I used to be the person that pushed away trying. And
mm.
now, whenever I feel discomfort, I dive right in. My mom thinks I'm a psychopath for it because she's like, I just could not put myself in those situations. And I'm like, I love it because it's alchemy.
Mm,
It's
hmm.
alchemy.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I think it's so true. And it kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever read The Alchemist.
Oh
But
yeah,
yeah.
many times.
So pursuing your own like personal omen, right? And I think kind of like what you were saying reminds me a lot of that story and that journey where it's among the path, we're going to have a lot of things that are going to derail us or take us off
Yeah.
our trail, right? There's going to be a lot of things that, are glitzy and glamoury. Don't know if glamoury is a word, but we're using it. So like the glitz and glamour, right? And I think it's so, so important that when you find that alignment and you really can lean in. So what you're speaking to is like your intuition and
Mhm.
and telling you like, hey, like this is kind of fucking scary, but my gut and my heart is telling me that I need to do this thing, right?
Yes.
And I think that is a really, really important lesson and decision because it really leads you to a place of peace, whether
Yes.
it results in the result you perceived it was going to achieve or it doesn't,
Yeah.
right? And I think one of my favorite quotes by Mitch Albom is, it's at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, comfort, love, and a peaceful heart, right?
Hmm.
So I think when we lean into these things that are difficult, when we lean into these things that are hard or that we perceive as, I don't know if I can do it, but I'm going to try anyways, right? Not only are we raising our glass ceiling that you and I talked about for your
Yep.
self-worth, but you're showing yourself that you can do these things that you previously perceived that you couldn't. And at the end of the day, you're going to be more at peace rather than feel that resistance, fear, shame, guilt that, a lot of us tend to feel when we don't lean into it. So I think that's a really beautiful way to look at it. And I appreciate your sort of insight on how mistakes have shaped you a ton.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I am very thankful for all of the mistakes that I made because I wouldn't be the person that I am today without them.
Mm. And that leads me to my last question for you, which is perfecto. Very nice. Uh,
Very
yeah,
nice.
very nice. So my last question. So the name of this podcast is called These Little Moments Podcast, right? And I basically, to give you quick context, the reason I named it that is because I had part of my own journey was I was at a seminar, Jordan Side seminar, and a lot of people were being very vulnerable, right? And they were saying whether it was binge eating, whether it was emotional eating, like things that they really were struggling with, right? And they were just being very deep and real. So it inspired me in that moment in front of like 50, 60 people to share about my own struggles with mental health, anxiety, depression at the time that I had not shared with anybody. And it was that little moment for me that really was a big catalyst that I look back at now that kind of propelled me into this journey of, self-reflection and mental health and doing the little things to create these big changes in life. So my question for you is, what is a little moment in your life that sticks out that you can look back and say that was a big turn that made me the person I am today?
Mm, I think that it was, I'm gonna try not to get emotional. At some point towards the beginning of my healing journey, I could remember sitting on the beach, processing a very recent at that time event that had happened that was very traumatic. And I don't know where this voice came from. I don't know if it was within me. I don't know if it was from, a higher source, but it's when I reached clarity. It said everything is going to be okay. And said you are not all of these experiences, but
Mm,
you're going to grow if you can see who you are underneath all of this. And it was just this pull to let go and shed all of these things that I had been carrying around in my life.
mm,
And it was just this, I can't even describe it. It was just this immense feeling of peace and
mm,
love. And I was a changed person after that, sitting at the beach. Like I just thought I was going to go watch the sunset, and it just became like an entire different experience for me. But that is kind of what opened up my mind and my heart, and I just allowed myself to just open to everything.
mm.
Completely changed my life. That was my little moment.
I love that. And I appreciate your vulnerability because that's like one of my favorite qualities that, in anybody. So I think that is such a beautiful thing, like being able to feel this wave, like ironically that you're at the beach, but feel this wave of peace and love and this knowing that everything's going to be okay and that everything you've experienced up to this point led you exactly where you need to be. And I think that is
Mhm.
such a beautiful and powerful moment that you experienced. I appreciate you
Yeah.
sharing that.
Yeah.
So bravo. Little round of applause.
So fun.
Great job. Where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Lauren with two N's dot Elizabeth X. It's where I hang out the most. So I'd
Mhm.
recommend going there. Um, but yes, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I absolutely loved this conversation.
Oh, my pleasure. And you are an this is only what, your second or third podcast you've ever done?
Second.
And you're a freaking natural. So
Oh,
it's
thank you. Thank you. I got
so
to get the
amazing.
reps in.
That's right. Well, I appreciate you being on. And yeah, we'll see you guys soon. Peace.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye.